I welcome George Savvides to speak to us.
Thank you, Hilary. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to spend just 10 minutes explaining a perspective that I've gained having spent 10 years on the International Board of World Vision. I think and I'm absolutely committed to the belief that it's through business that we can unlock the enormous potential that 3 billion people in the world can bring to us by letting them participate in the economic global cycle. Through trade and through commercial endeavours that we can improve the participation of these individuals in the broader world around us. About 5 years ago, World Vision started up a micro-enterprise development program called Vision Fund, humble beginnings. Today it's about a $350 million US fund, and the credit in that fund keeps revolving to participants of the fund. Mainly, the main participants are women. About 80% of them receive loans from the Vision Fund, and their loans have an average value of about $100 to $200 each. Their creditworthiness is amazing. 98% of the loans are repaid. It's almost equivalent to Australian creditworthiness, but I don't know what that means these days. An example of what might happen is that a group of women may apply for a loan, and they may procure, if they're eligible, say 100 chickens in their particular village. Within months, they've repaid the loan. They've produced eggs, which they've sold, meat, and also they've bred the chickens to over 500 from the 100 that they've started. It could be a sewing machine, it could be an agricultural program. And we've seen this capital turn around, and now there's been over 1 million recipients since the 5 years that this vehicle has started. My point in sharing that story is that I'm amazed by the return on investment. To set aside $100 and to create a productive yield of over 500% in a 6-month period is just amazing. Any Australian business leader would invest in such a program. In our Australian context, in our first world context, projects don't have that kind of yield. But in another part of the world, where incomes are low and opportunity is scarce, and the key access issue is resource, the returns on those kinds of investments are just enormous. How do we create a language for corporates to understand the Millennium Development Goals? I think I've got a list of them here. The summary here comes from some of our board meeting minutes from the Business for Millennium Development Group, which I've been a part of as we develop corporate association with this quest. Well, let me just pick two of the goals. Let's, for example, pick the second and the third, promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, and also universal primary education. And let's pick an example of an Australian corporate. I won't name names, but they sell lots of building hardware in retail footprints that look like large warehouses. And there's lots of them around Australia, and you'll notice that a lot of the content of this footprint are products that come from the parts of the world that we're referring to today that need this kind of compliance. And I'm a manufacturing engineer by background in my early days, and I'm sort of familiar with this sort of territory, but let's just pick one part of the footprint of this plant. They actually make barbecues. That's a good example for an Australian audience. There's $300 million worth of barbecues sold a year from this retailer. They only paid $100 million for their product. So what they purchased, they sold at a 3-time margin. That's fine. That's not unusual. $50 million of the $100 million came from a fabrication plant of a second or third tier subcontractor in Southeast Asia. The plant, they needed to make 6,000 cabinets a year, 1,000 cabinets a day, 6,000 a week, 1,000 a day, to make their quota of 300,000 cabinets that produced this $100 million worth of purchased goods that were on-sold to Australians for $300 million. How do the MDGs relate to the world of business? Well, the villages from which the workers came from that produced those cabinets comprised of people who were working at wages of around $2, $3 or $4 a day. In this particular plant, the workers were young women. They were so young they should have been at school, but there was no other means for them to fund their schooling, so they were there at work. So the MDG opportunity is that a corporate who sources the product from these subcontracting locations could actually pay the substitute wage and have those young girls go to school. At $2 or $3 a day, or whatever the number is, that comes to the princely sum of $20,000 a year for all of the workers in that plant. Do you think an Australian corporate that's generating $300 million worth of revenue could afford that? Absolutely. Have they ever been given a business case that explains it in a language that they can understand? No. And then we have to find a teacher. And at 5,000 Australian dollars a year, the appropriate aid organisation can provide the teacher, substitute the income, bring the children into the classroom, and in a space of a short period of time, we've achieved one of the MDGs, or two of them at least. So when we extrapolate that to a larger spectrum, say $10 billion worth of trade, Australia and, say, Southeast Asia in finished goods that come from factories and, if you like, sweatshops that pay labour at the rates that I've already explained, can we turn this trade into a language where Australian corporates, whether they're miners or suppliers, whether we're talking about supply chain that is in finished goods or raw materials, where we can see a component of that supply chain to actually require a dividend, an MDG dividend, paid by the corporate who purchases these goods, who substitutes for the labour that is being used, that achieves 2 or 3 of these MDGs. When it's explained in that kind of language, I haven't found a corporate that said, of course we can pay that kind of money. And so the challenge, I think, for our conversation today is turning the language of aid and the language of NGOs into the language that corporates can understand, so they don't get off the hook, that they can't run the excuse that, oh, well, we need monitoring programs, we need audit and risk management. How can we send monies off and not understand where it comes from? So by turning it into a business case, by having accredited organisations provide the resources that deliver the outcomes, then all of a sudden we might have a substantial amount of corporate participation. We might have annual reports that can salute the flag, that can say that our supply chains are morally aligned with the values that we have in this nation. Some food for thought. Thank you.